Good morning. It's good to see you, or let you see me. Getting started a little later or earlier, depending on the perspective. But anyway, I'm here. I'm here to talk about the book of Acts, to enjoy thinking about what Paul did and how great his legacy is for us. One of the things I did to prepare for this morning, might not seem like sometimes I prepare, but I do. Anyway, was to read Barclay. William Barclay is my absolute favorite commentator on the books of the Bible. He did, I believe, almost every New Testament book. And he wrote during the mid to late 50s. But I was reading him, and so I'm going to talk, and the text is the governor of Archaea, Providence, where Paul was. Anyway, it was really interesting. He talked about the governor whose name is Gallio, I think, probably mispronounced. But the interesting thing was that he had historical documents that said that this governor was really, really kind. To have a Roman governor who was known as kind and caring. And so, although this text is translated that he doesn't care, I also think it's that he did not want to weigh in and arrest and cause problems to those who were causing problems in the Jewish community. So I'll just read, and I'm at Acts 18, verse 12, and I'm going on for about 7 verses, I think. Anyway, here we are. But when Gallio was governor of Arcadia, Providence, the Jews got up a campaign against Paul. Hey, how are you doing this morning? And hauled Paul into court and filed charges. This man is seducing the people into acts of worship that are illegal. Just as Paul was about to defend himself, Gallio interrupted and said to the Jews, "If this is a matter of criminal conduct, I would gladly hear you out. But it sounds like to me one more Jewish squabble, another of your endless hair-splitting quarrels over religion. Take care of it on your own. I can't be bothered with this nonsense." And he cleared them all out of the courtroom. Now, the street rabble turned on Sethios, the synagogue president, and beat him up in plain sight of the court, and Gallio didn't raise a finger. He could not have cared less. Paul stayed a little longer in Corinth, but then it was time to leave his friends. Saying goodbye, he sailed for Syria. Priscilla and Aquila went with him. Before boarding the ship in the harbor town of Chetria, he had his head shaved as a part of a vow that he had taken. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in here that to me would be really helpful to understand. One is that what they're trying to do is just have one group be powerful over the other group, and they want to use Rome. They actually want to use Rome to manipulate the situation so that the one group has more power than the other group. And, Sethos, who was head of the synagogue, hadn't done anything, but still they figured they couldn't touch Paul. So one of the reasons that it was difficult to touch Paul, and I've said this before, is that he was a Roman citizen. So since he was a Roman citizen, hey Annie, Paul couldn't be touched. And so instead they just beat up one of their other Jewish folk. And it's amazing how many people get beat up in the book of Acts. I mean, they just have zero tolerance for people having different religious views. Anyway, so I just want to say one more thing, and then I'll talk about other stuff. But so it says that Paul shaved his head because of a vow that he had taken. So Jews at times in their lives took a vow to not cut their hair and to not eat meat and to not drink wine. And it was seen as a thank offering to God. I don't know if you remember, but one of the things that was said about John the Baptist was that he did not cut his hair and he did not drink wine. Probably he didn't eat meat. meat was not all that available anyway. Some lamb, but that was special occasions. So here is Paul giving a thank offering, and we can imagine that he was giving a thank offering for safe travels and for all of the places he had been able to be, and for God getting him out of jail and getting him out of town when he needed to do that. So what it looked like was, in terms of shaving his head as a part of his vow, was that at the completion of those 30 days, which he could have done longer, but 30 days was common, he would have gone to the sacred place, whether it was a synagogue or a sacred altar, and actually shaved his head there and then burned the hair there as an offering to God. So again, I just think all of this is cool, that he was intentional about a time of Thanksgiving, and it wasn't just bowing his head before a meal, but it was literally having a time of abstinence. Again, no hair cutting, no eating meat, no drinking wine for a period of time. Also, because in clergy world, we're starting to prepare for Ash Wednesday. It's a few weeks away, but preparations start a little bit earlier for us. So here is Paul, and it's really, to me, interesting, the encounter with Roman authorities, because Eugene Peterson has Gallio translated as, if this is a matter of criminal conduct, I'll gladly hear you out. But it sounds like to me one more Jewish squabble, another of your endless hair-splitting quarrels over religion. I think that's a perfect definition of most disagreements about religion. We just get all upset and crazy about hair-splitting quarrels about things that really don't matter at all to me. There have been arguments about who is in and who is out since probably there's two people to choose who was in and who was out. And our church, any church, has certainly lived that. Church is the one thing that multiplies by division. Because as soon as somebody got upset, and of course, Martin Luther, who started the Protestant Reformation, was simply trying to do a reform movement within the Catholic Church and say, these things aren't working for us. Let's look at what's essential to our faith and let's work with that. And of course, they threw him out. And the other big division we know is Henry VIII wanting to get an heir for his throne. So he said, I won't be Catholic anymore. I'll start my own religion. So both of those were huge in the 14th and 15th centuries. To us, they kind of look like blips on the screen. But understand that Paul wanted people to encounter the living God who had come to us in this clear human being of Jesus Christ and had taught about God's care and God's compassion and God's redemption of our lives. And there were, as we know, since we've read through the book of Acts together, there were a number of groups who did not want to hear about a compassionate God who included everyone and who was reaching out to all of God's creation. They wanted to think that they were special and that God loved them best. My friend once said, she was going to get me a t-shirt that said, Jesus loves everyone, but I'm his favorite. So I think religions have been along that line. Also, again, he's traveling on. He's been in Corinth a while. There are those who have been willing to believe, and he's probably pretty much encountered all of the Jewish community that's in Corinth and all of the folks who are willing to think about one creator God that Paul starts with, if they are Gentiles. And so he's ready to move on. And as I said, Aquila and Priscilla become important now, traveling friends with him. Not only did he encounter them, but they travel with him as he goes on to the next place. And part of what he's going to do is not only find new communities to preach to, but check in with the communities that he loved and cared about. So kind of see how they're doing. I am amazed at Paul's energy because he just keeps moving and keeps traveling. I know that I don't have a clear idea of how long he stayed in the passage that I read last week. He stayed about 1.5 years there, so he could regroup strength, but he was willing and felt led to keep moving on. So this morning I think about how our religious groups continue to argue over hair-splitting quarrels, that we just want to say how holy God needs us. And as far as I can see, what Jesus said was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And there wasn't a whole lot of other qualifiers for anything. So that's me. But everybody knows I'm pretty liberal. So also not wanting to stress at this point in my life, not wanting to get upset about who is doing it right and who is not doing it right. To me, that's a judgment. And I don't, it's not healthy or helpful, I think, to go there. Instead, just try to encounter people where they are and say, how's it going for you? Can I pray for anything? Can I be helpful? Because I've certainly messed up enough in my life that I don't think I can look at anybody else and think whether they are or not doing well with it. So that's the first thing, is to think about how the church has not changed, that we continue to argue with one another and take sides and try to have God take sides, which to me is the bad news, that we attribute to God concern about who's good enough. To me, that's not helpful. And then for him to be going on to the next place in a time in which he is first giving God a thank offering of his hair. I'd like to keep my hair. It's an ongoing battle for me. But to have this thank offering of a month. So again, I can imagine, I don't know that it's true, but I can imagine that Paul knew in his own mind that he was preparing to travel. And before he was going to get on the road again, he wanted to have a time in which he was in the same place with the same people, being able to carry out this act of thanksgiving. And so he has that, perhaps, again, a month was common, that month before he was to go again, where he could modify his diet to not eat meat and to not drink wine, but also not to cut his hair and to give thanks to God. So giving thanks to God is always a good thing. And I pray blessings upon you this day. Next week, we will finish up chapter 18, which will be good to keep moving and to see where Paul is going next, and to find how he is continuing to meet all kinds of interesting characters, like Gallio, a kind and just governor of Rome, and moving in his own way of thanksgiving and obedience to God's will. It inspires me. Anyway, y'all take care. I'm on my way for my rest of my day. Prayers and blessings.